MCP. We are going to be talking about probably the most popular term in AI right now. It blew up at the beginning of this year. It was launched by Anthropic late 2024 and has just been trending like crazy everywhere. So you've probably heard about it by now. You've probably seen videos on YouTube, posts on LinkedIn, on X. What I'm hoping to cover today is a lot more than just what MCP is. I want to spend a good amount of time talking about the why behind MCP, why it's becoming so popular, why there's so much adoption for it now, including from Anthropic's own competitors like OpenAI, who Sam Altman has openly supported MCP, and they have started to adopt it in their own clients like ChatGPT. So there is really good reason for why it's becoming adopted, and that's what we're going to be mostly focusing on today. What does it mean for AI engineers or developers building AI applications, for businesses and companies trying to build AI infrastructure and adopt AI, for end users and consumers? I think it's important for everyone to have at least a basic understanding of what MCP is. But if you are building AI applications yourself, I think it's even more critical for you to have a deep understanding of what the true value of MCP is. So every good MCP video starts with the obligatory trend view of how this library has just been blowing up. And of course, if you look at the star history, it's not even exponential anymore. You have some popular libraries here, including Crew AI Curve in pink. And you can see MCP in just 8 weeks has just basically gone straight up. And if you look at Google Trends, we have 5 times the amount of search volume going to MCP versus AI agents, which is crazy because AI agents are all the rage right now too. And of course, if you do a search on YouTube, you'll find a ton of videos on how you could be making a ton of money if you're adopting MCP with your agents. So in this video, we're not going to build MCP into any agents. That's going to come in the next video. I want to spend most of the time talking about what MCP is and why it's so important for everyone to understand it. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video, if you find value in this video, to please give it a like and consider subscribing so you can get all of the content around building AI, how to adopt it for your business or for your use case, and helping you bring that to production. Without further ado, let's get into it. All right, we're going to be spending a whole lot of time today in Excalidraw going through what I hope are some more clear diagrams to help you understand what MCP is. But before we do that, let's hop over really quick to the Model Context Protocol official docs. This protocol was, of course, released by Anthropic in late 2024. You can come here to read a lot more than we'll cover today, but hopefully I'll do a good job of summarizing everything for you. The way Anthropic describes it is as an open protocol that standardizes how applications provide context to LLMs, and they say you can think about it as a USB-C port for AI apps. So another way to put that is it is a new standard way for what you're building with LLMs, with AI agents, for those applications to be able to connect to and talk to resources. And typically by resources, we're going to mean prompts, tools, and data. So how exactly does MCP do this? How does it really work? They're introducing this new architecture that's going to implement this protocol and standardize everything. These are the core ideas in this diagram and in these bullet points below. Like I said, I will link this in the description so you can go and read about it more, but I'm hoping I can give a much more illustrative explanation. So you've got MCP hosts, MCP servers, and MCP clients. Those are the 3 new concepts that this architecture introduces and which are important to understand. So let's start with the MCP host, which is going to be any app or tool or program that is using an LLM or AI agent. So examples of this are Cursor, Claude Desktop, and you can also have LLM workflows on your own computer, like in a Python script or even on the cloud, like an N8N automation, anything really that has an LLM within it. So an MCP host is going to have the code for the LLM or the AI agents in it, and it's also going to have the MCP client code. So that's what we refer to as the MCP host. It's really one of these types of apps that has the code for the LLM or the agents and also is going to now have code for the MCP client. The client is an object that is going to facilitate all of the communication using that MCP protocol to the MCP servers. And this client, you only have to set it up once for each LLM application or each MCP host. And from now on, I'm just going to refer to hosts as AI apps. So you only need one MCP client per AI app, and that's really the beauty of it, because once you set it up, you can use it to connect to all kinds of MCP servers that are either remotely hosted, like these two examples for Slack and GitHub, or they can be hosted locally on your computer. In this case, we have an MCP server for using the file system and a custom backend that we can write ourselves in Python, for example. All of these MCP servers could be connected to the same client, but you literally have thousands and thousands and many more coming online every single day. So the options really are endless at this point. And pretty soon, every single service that you can think of, I'm sure, will be implementing an MCP server of their own. Once we connect our client to these MCP servers, we then can just have a single connection between our AI agents or LLMs and this client. The reason why that's important is because these connections to the server are all standardized, like we just said, with the MCP protocol. And now you really only have to write one integration between your LLM or your AI agent and the client. Before, what we had to do was we had to build tools. If you can think of, getting rid of this MCP client, you would have had one tool to talk to your custom backend, a second tool to talk to the file system, a third tool to talk to the GitHub repository or GitHub API, and a fourth tool to talk to Slack. And it's actually much worse than that, because in reality, you probably would have had many tools that talk to Slack. So for example, one tool that will read your messages, another tool that will post to specific Slack channels, a third tool that would give you information on users, etc., etc. For GitHub, it would be all of the functions that you have to manage repos, like pulling repos, cloning repos, pushing the repos, etc. And so the amount of tools that you would have had to write manually and have in this application for your AI agents to access would have probably been in the hundreds for this example. But in this case, you just have to write one integration from your AI agents to this client, and then you have to set up this client once, and then it's just pretty much plug and play for all of these MCP servers. Okay, if this isn't completely sinking in yet for you, don't worry. I think the easiest way to learn this is through practical examples and understanding really what would things look like with or without MCP. And we can think about it from three different perspectives. One is for businesses or companies trying to adopt AI. What does that really look like? What would the infrastructure look like if you had MCP versus not having MCP? And then similarly, we'll see what things look like with and without MCP from the perspective of end users and AI engineers and developers who are building AI apps. So let's start with the business perspective. Why should businesses or companies care if they are building AI infrastructure in their company about MCP? So if you don't have MCP, things would kind of look like this. Let's say you have 3 different resources in the company called OnlyVans LLC. If you know, you know. Go and check out the last 2 videos to see how we built a data analyst for this company. you have these three different resources, and let's say you have just three teams. The finance team, one is the business intelligence team, and then you have the lone wolf, Kenny, the superstar in the company, obviously, building his own LLM applications to automate workflows, to generate reports, et cetera, et cetera. And the app that he's building has to connect to these three different resources. He has to build the tools in his LLM app for each of these, right? So for the company data, he's going to build some tool that can run SQL queries against that data, and maybe another tool that can look up specific queries, and maybe another tool that can pull documents from the documents database. Could be like Confluence or Jira or wherever it is, Google Docs, and then another tool that pulls data from the custom CRM that the company has. And then you aggregate all of these results into your LLM app and do something useful with it, right? So the tools are defined within the LLM app that Kenny is building. And then you go over to the finance team, and the finance team is doing the same thing, except the finance team has several members in it. So they're going to be building multiple apps. And each one of these apps is, again, going to have these unique, bespoke tool connections that they've defined locally within their app to connect to these same resources. But it gets worse. Then you go over to the BI team, and the BI team's doing a whole thing. They've got dozens and dozens of these apps, making all kinds of connections to these same resources. And because the tools live within these LLM apps, everyone is doing it differently, and nothing is standardized. So for one, you have a bunch of work that's being repeated, so a ton of waste, but there's other downsides to it too. So you can imagine if you make a change in the company database, let's say we add a new schema, and all of a sudden Kenny has to change one of his tool calls to account for that new schema and make sure that he's pulling in the data from it. But now the finance team has to do the same thing. And so you're going to have all of these tool changes that have to happen, but they're going to happen individually in all of these different LLM applications. And so there's a lot of overhead for maintaining these apps, for debugging them, and for rolling out updates. So that's really the problem. Every single one of these integrations is unique when tools are defined app side. This is the current state at OnlyVans without MCP. So there has to be a better way. Surprise, surprise, it's MCP to the rescue, and things look very different with MCP. So with MCP, we're going to take a server and put it in between each resource and all of these LLM apps. Let's look at the server, for example, for the company data. Instead of having a million different connections, we are going to put the tool definitions, the tool execution, and all of that logic onto the MCP server. So we're only going to define it once instead of doing it for every single one of these individual apps. We're going to define it once, and we're going to integrate that directly to the company data. So that's the green arrow. Then all of the clients, which are going to follow the same protocol, which remember again standardizes all of this communication, meaning how these clients are talking to the server, how they're pulling tool information, how they're calling tools. All of that is exactly the same for all of these clients. And now you only have to manage this one integration up here. So we just went from, N number of apps times M number of resources. We went from N times M complexity to now just M complexity, where you have to define these tool integrations to your resource once for each server. Let's say we have a change to a tool now. We have to make a change because something changed in the resource. So we're going to go and we're going to update the tool in the MCP server once. Nothing has changed for the connection between the client and the server. And so now all of these apps automatically get that change. So you've significantly reduced the complexity and the overhead to create the tools, to maintain them, to debug them, to update them, etc. So all of that because we moved the tool definitions to the server side. Ain't that a thing of beauty? So hopefully that's pretty convincing of why businesses and companies should care about MCP and really start adopting it ASAP before you get to something that looks like this. But what about builders like you and me? What about AI engineers and AI devs that are creating LLM applications? Well, there is definitely a benefit for us as well. Imagine you've got your $1 million AI app and it's some multi-agent app and you need these agents to be talking to all of these different services. Like we saw earlier, you might implement your own custom backend. You might give it access to your local file system, and so you pull the file system MCP server from GitHub, which is already an existing repo, so you didn't have to write any of the code yourself. Yay. And then you've got all of the remote servers that you can connect to that, again, you didn't have to write, but you can immediately benefit from the integrations. So it immediately gives your app some value because of this new capability. But you didn't write any of these tools yourself. All you wrote was the code for your client. And now you can plug and play literally thousands and thousands of these tools and capabilities from these existing servers. You're generating so much value for all of these users. The users are just piling in so much that it crashes your app. Or maybe that didn't work out so well. You got the value proposition wrong and you actually don't have that many users and your app dies. But it's okay because you used MCP. So now you have your $1 billion idea, and because you used MCP, you don't have to rewrite this custom backend. You don't have to recreate this file system, and you don't have to recreate any of these remote servers because they're always there and they've been updated. And so now you have your $1 billion app idea and you write your new MCP client and you connect it to all of the same resources that you had before. Again, not having to reinvent the wheel. You just took it and it's plug and play into your next client and things are good again. Now you've got even more users. But then, oh no, things aren't as good as you thought. And once again, your users flee because you offered a free tier that made you go bankrupt. And now you don't have a use case for these apps anymore, but it's okay because you have Claude Desktop and you can still use these servers that you set up by just connecting them to the MCP client in Claude, and at least you get to use it and be happy. So now you can see how, as an end user and not some AI guru or developer, you can still get a lot of utility out of this. You can connect your Claude Desktop or your local IDE like Cursor to these servers and have it do real work for you, right? If you gave Claude Desktop the ability to connect to your Slack, to Google Drive, to Google Calendar, to Notion, places where you have a lot of your own existing workflows and where you get a lot of stuff done, then you can access all of that directly through the Claude chat and just have Claude do a lot of the manual work for you without ever writing a single line of code. All you have to do is do this simple integration. So that's really the power of MCP in standardizing it. You can see how it has value for everyone. We looked at big enterprises to small companies to AI engineers creating AI apps, all the way down to the end user. And in all cases, there really is a tremendous amount of value in using these MCP servers. All right, now that you have a good understanding of what MCP is and how much value it can bring to everyone, let's talk about how you can start using these immediately with your own local IDEs or agents like Claude Desktop. So first, I will link the GitHub official repo. I suggest you follow it, and if you are technical, you can look through the various SDKs that they have to learn about how you can use them to build your own servers and your own clients in your applications. Of course, I'll be showing you step by step how to do that exactly in the next video. In the repo, you can go to the servers list, and they have a list of a bunch of official servers. You got Brave Search, you got the file system that we were talking about earlier, and then these are super useful tools that we're going to be integrating into the data analyst agent in the next video, Git and GitHub. But you've got tons and tons of other ones, so I suggest you come and look through. There's a bunch of third-party servers that are already up, and in addition to the server list that is on the official MCP GitHub, there are also directories where you can find a lot of really awesome servers. And one of those directories is called Glamma. And on Glamma, you can just search for whatever type of MCP server you want. Some are official, so you'll know if it has a check mark, whether it is an official server that's been verified by Glamma itself. And you can always view the source code on GitHub. This is for Notion, and it's been super useful for me, so I'm going to show you how to set this up locally. It's something that I actually use all the time. So we're going to set that up with Claude. But you can go onto the homepage and just browse by category or search for a particular one if you already know what you want. So I highly recommend checking this out. Now today we're going to be setting up two of my favorite MCP servers, one on Cursor and one on Claude Desktop. The one that we're going to be setting up in Cursor, and the steps are really similar whether you're setting up in VS Code or Windsurf, but I'll just show you how this works. And if you don't know what Context 7 is, they go and they crawl all of the documentation for a given library, and they turn those docs into an LLM-friendly text that can be fed into LLMs so that if you're building a coding agent locally or you're using an IDE coding agent like Cursor, they can understand the docs much better, and then they can produce much higher quality code. So if you're big on vibe coding, then this is definitely a game changer as an MCP that you could start using in your workflow. So here you can see you got a ton of popular libraries like Supabase, ShadCN, FastAPI, Pydantic, LangGraph. I've definitely used this one before. If you're familiar with LangChain at all, you know that everything is changing constantly. And a lot of times things become outdated super fast, so it is important to always have the latest docs, and this is constantly updated. So in this case, you can see it was updated 16 hours ago. So this is just a way to provide the latest context and the most accurate context for documentation to your LLMs. We're going to go ahead and integrate this into Cursor, and all of these are pretty straightforward to set up. So if you can follow this example, you should really be able to set up any MCP server in your IDE. The directions might be slightly different depending on which IDE you're using, but again, usually these have specific instructions for each type of IDE. Like this one has Cursor instructions, and then you have VS Code instructions and Windsurf instructions, and usually they are identical. Like if you see these two are exactly the same for the configuration. So it should be pretty straightforward. So all you're going to do is just copy this JSON config. It's as easy as that, and then pop over to Cursor. Once you've got Cursor open, you can go to the settings and go to the MCP tab. And here you can see I've already set it up, but I'll just go ahead and delete this. So normally this would look something like this. It would be an empty JSON, and you would just have MCP servers here. So all I have to do is paste in what we copied from there and save it. And now this is going to have the context server set up. And if it looks red, if the status is not green, just wait a second and then hit refresh, and you should see it resolve that remote server pretty quickly. And that's it. Your MCP server is fully loaded. So now you can just open your Cursor chat, and you should be able to ask it to look at specific docs. So I can ask, hey, can you check the context 7 docs for lang graph. Actually, I'll ask it specifically about MCP servers. Lang chain MCP adapters library. What is the class I need to build a client, an MCP client? So I'm going to ask it a very specific question about the MCP adapters library, and it's going to have to look up the documentation for it. So here you can see it's calling the MCP tool. It's going to first resolve the library ID. That means it's going to find the specific ID for the library so that it can then pull the documentation by that ID. So I'll just hit run tool, and once it has the ID, then it should use that ID to go and pull all the documentation for it. So here it's going to get the library docs, so we can hit run, and this should be able to give me a very specific answer. So here we go. It is the multi-server MCP client, and this is a relatively newish class. It's a newer library since MCP came out this year, so this isn't necessarily data that these models would have, but it is able to figure that out. And because it's working with the official docs, it's probably going to give you a much better answer than a simple web search, which a lot of times, if there might not be a ton on the internet yet, but here we can get it from the official docs. So this should definitely level up your vibe coding and being able to get things done with Cursor with less hallucinations and less errors. Okay, now I'm going to show you how to connect MCP servers to your Claude desktop, or if you're using the desktop version of OpenAI's ChatGPT, or any other agent that you have running locally in an app like this. So for Claude, you can always check what tools you have by clicking on this search and tools little button. You'll see that I have web search enabled. That comes by default from Anthropic, and there's also some Google connected tools, but none of these are MCPs. I don't actually have any MCPs connected to it yet. Without any MCPs set up, Claude has no context into my Notion. So if I ask it a question about it, it shouldn't be able to respond. So I'm asking it to give me a really brief summary of the latest Notion cheat sheet that I made for this YouTube episode. I usually write all of my cheat sheets that accompany each episode in Notion. And here you can see Claude says I don't currently have access to that specific document. So it doesn't have access to my Notion. Let's see how this changes once we hook up the MCP. The way that you can check what MCPs you have is by going to the settings for Claude. And I don't mean the settings in the side menu over here at the bottom, but if you go to the application settings by going to your start bar or at the top, then you get this set of settings here for the actual app. And you're going to want to go to the developer tab. This is where you can set up the config for the MCP servers. So if I click on edit config, you'll get a pop-up for the actual file, which is going to be just a JSON. And you can open this in whatever you want. I'll just open it in a text editor, and we can zoom in. And again, you're just similar to what we saw in Cursor, you're going to have an empty JSON file with just the key MCP servers. So now what I can do is hop over to the Notion repo because I want to install the Notion MCP server. This is such an awesome MCP server because I use Notion every day. It allows you to pull data from Notion. So if you have, a bunch of documents, schedules, tasks lists, you can have Claude pull all of that and make summaries for you, do reports, do some analysis, or even have it write pieces of content for you. So honestly, this really helps you level up your Notion game without using, the built-in AI that they have in Notion. In order to set this up, it's again pretty straightforward, but there are some authentication steps that you have to take. I'm not going to go through exactly all of that. It's written step by step on this README, so I suggest if you are interested in doing this to go through it. And then once you set up the permissions and get your API key, similar to what we did with Cursor, you're just going to want to copy the JSON config. So we'll come here and copy that, and then we'll pop back over to the MCP servers config and then just paste over that. And if you look at this closely, you'll see that it's a little more complicated than the one that we ran for context 7. In this case, we've also specified an environment variable. And so here you have authorization headers. So once you go through the authentication process in the README and set up your key, you're just going to want to paste it in here, which I will now do offline. Cool, so I pasted in my key and then I saved that config. Now I'm back in Claude. Now if you go back to the settings, you'll see that there's nothing here. That's just because it takes a little while that's just because Claude hasn't picked it up yet. What you want to do is just exit the whole program. So actually quit the Claude client and then you can open it back up. And then if you go back to the search and tools, you should see it now. Sure enough, here it is loaded. We have the Notion API, and then these are all of the requests that Claude has access to. So you can see it's pretty in depth. It can even create databases for you, update databases, retrieve them, update blocks, change blocks, get user information. So now let's ask it, what was give me a super short summary of the latest cheat sheet I made for the MCP server YouTube episode. So now you can see that it is calling this tool, and I'll allow it. It's going to look for my note. It's going to look through all of my Notion and figure out what pages do I have this YouTube cheat sheet in. I'm just going to click always allow because sometimes it does have to make several calls and I don't want to wait for every single one. So I'll just hit always allow. And if it is your first time running that particular tool, it will prompt you again and ask if you want to run that or not. But once it's run, see like this tool here, the get block children, it's already ran that once. Now it's not going to ask me again. It's just going to keep going with it. And now we get the summary of the cheat sheet, and there you go. And I can guarantee you the actual cheat sheet is a lot more detailed than that. I did tell it to give me a super simple summary. So if you are interested, as always, I have cheat sheets available for my community members. Signing up is free, and you will get every cheat sheet that I release for every single episode, which will have a lot more detail and will cover more comprehensive topics than I can cover in these videos and hopefully bring you a lot of value. But yeah, if you're interested in that, check out the community link in the description below and feel free to join. And that's going to do it for today's video. So hopefully you appreciate the power of MCPs and can see how it can bring a lot of value for you, for your company. If you did enjoy this video, please drop a like and subscribe so that you can catch the next episode where we will be building the MCP client ourselves and connecting our LangGraph agent to it so that it can access a bunch of MCP servers to really give our agents superpowers. I'll see you in the next one.